So, September the 17th, 2017, I was being brought from the Western Regional Jail to Recovery Point, Huntington. And the man that walked in there that day, I can assure you, was as lost and broken as a man could possibly be. I had given everything worthwhile in this life away. I had no hope. I had nothing. And yet, here I sit, speaking with all of you tonight, as far the opposite of that man that walked in there that day as I could be. So the question is how does something like that happen? How does a man go from having no choice in this life other than go dope sick or get well to having any choice that he could possibly have, from hopeless to hopeful, from a meaningless existence to a life of meaning? Well, that's what I hope to tell all you here tonight, so let's get started with that. September the 9th, 1990, I was born at Cabell Huntington Hospital, and I was born to the greatest parents that any man could ever ask for. They both instilled in me all of the morals and values that any parent should ever give their children. I never really wanted for anything. They made sure that I worked for it, but if I wanted it, I got it. I did really good in school. Grew up in Baptist church. I had these hopes and dreams as a kid. I remember thinking to myself, like, one day when I grow up, if I have a wife, I will be the best husband. If I have children, I will be the best father. I will have the job that I want. I had all these dreams. But it's funny how, as time goes on, things change. But growing up, I did really good in school. I made good grades. I played basketball. I played baseball. I boxed for 10 years. Started boxing when I was 8. I had an older brother who went to the Olympic trials in boxing, and you best believe he tormented the hell out of me my whole life. But if he were here today, I would thank him because he toughened me up. So yeah, like I said, life was good and innocent and filled with joy, and I had a good family. But I'd say right around 9 years old, I got a little taste of life suffering for the first time. Something that really ripped heart from chest, as they say. I remember, I like to put a pin in my story right here. See, if you are the real alcoholic, such as myself, and you have read what is outlined in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, then you will know that the only salvation for a real alcoholic is a deep and profound relationship with God. The spiritual path, the higher power, whatever you want to call it. So I like to tell this story here because it's something that happened that I truly saw the hand of God. And that's the story of my father. So when I was 9 years old, we was at the boxing gym, and my brother was in the ring doing his thing. And my dad looked over at me and he said, "Son, let's go on a run." So me and him went running up the road and made maybe 1,000 feet, and out of nowhere, my dad went stiff as a board and fell flat on his face And I can remember that so vividly, even at 9 years old. And I remember saying, like, Dad, what happened? And he said, son, I don't know, I guess I tripped. But if I'm thinking about it now, he didn't know what happened. Well, long story short, he gets to King's Daughters in Kentucky, and they tell him he has multiple sclerosis, a tumorous plaque growing on his brain stem, which was preventing his brain signals from reaching his extremities, such as legs, things like that. So at 9 years old, I slowly watched my father, he was the greatest man that I ever knew. The hardest working, athletic man. When his kids were born, we were his life. And he was the best husband. The best example of a man that I could have ever been given. God blessed me with that. But I had to watch this man go from working hard like that to walking with a cane to a walker. By the time I was 13 or 14 years old, he was in a wheelchair. And, he eventually got to a point where he couldn't even pee on his own. He had to self-catheterize himself every time he wanted to take a pee. I can't even imagine that. But then eventually that wasn't working, so he had to get a permanent catheter. And by age 13 or 14, the roles were reversed for us. I had became the caretaker of my father, and I'd get him up out of his wheelchair every day. I would empty his pee bag. And almost every time that I did these things for him, he would look me right in the eyes, and he would say, I am so sorry, son, that you have to do this. I remember telling him over and over, Dad, you don't need to keep saying this. I am happy to do it. I would hope if I had a son and this happened to me that he would do it for me. But, I started to have a resentment towards God. Now, I can tell you today that I have realized that I was not resenting God. I resented my idea of God. And I was wrong. But more to that later. This is how life went on. My dad would be in and out of the hospital. I mean, he probably spent 4 years, every second of it, in the hospital with different visits and whatever was going on with him. His immune system was shot due to the disease. But we'll fast forward here. At age 23, early in the year 2013, my dad got really sick and went in the hospital, and long story short, he ended up going into a coma for right around 80 days. We'll just call it 80. And in this coma, he did not move or make a sound. His vitals were still there. His heart was still beating. Eventually, he got put on a ventilator. The blood pressure medication they had him on, they had to dialyze him every day after a while. But one fine day, me and my mother are standing in the room. The doctor walks in and she says, Mr. and Mrs. Parsons, you have a decision to make very soon. You see, the blood pressure medication that your husband and father is on is destroying his kidneys, so we're going to take him off of it. And when we do, he's going to go into cardiac arrest, so the decision is let him go or keep him on life support. My dad told me a long time ago that if it ever came to that, to let him go. So, I'd say 3 or 4 days later, right around day 80, I'm in there again, and in walks the doctor. And we know what time it is. When that doctor walked into that room, my poor mother goes running over there beside his bed and just starts crying and wailing, and she's saying, Alvin, it's now or never, baby. You got to wake up. You got to wake up right now. Please wake up. Tears streaming down her face, hitting his chest. And I'm standing there with a good buzz going. And I'm sitting there thinking, Mom, It's over. Just let him go. It's time. And when the doctor walked over there and started to mess with his stuff, take him off that medication, the second that she touched his stuff, my dad just came out of 80 days without a peep, 80 days without moving. It was in this 1 second. I did the math on this. It's somewhere around 10 million seconds in 80 days. And in that 1 second that he was basically going to be killed is the second that he sprung to life. He couldn't speak, but he was definitely back. And the feeling that I felt when I saw this, I didn't know how to feel. My mom was totally shocked, but the doctor, that was the best part. The doctor was so shocked. Like, Mr. Parsons, is this really happening, you know? And my dad he was back. And I will tell you right now that if I had any doubt that there was a God, there is a God, it was destroyed in that moment, because I felt it. You know, it's not words. It's not something that you can describe. It's a feeling, and you know what the feeling is. Like, you know how to breathe. Like, you know how to grow your own hair. It's like that. But within 2 weeks, my dad was back at the house, safe and sound. Now, as I'll tell later in this story, my brother, suffering from the disease of addiction and alcoholism like myself, he hung himself in 2012. Now, here we are, 2013, I will say right around March, April, somewhere in there. My dad's home, and this is what I'm going to tell you. He had a little bucket list. He wanted roughly 3 things. Number 1, he wanted to hold a grandbaby. You know, I didn't even have a girlfriend at the time, you know, and my brother did what he did. He wanted to see one of his sons get married. And he wanted to die at home, not in the hospital, and not suffering. Those are the 3 things he wanted. Well, after he was home for about 2 weeks, roughly, I was downstairs playing Xbox at like 3 in the morning, and I just hear him yelling from the other end of the house, "Jared, come back here." So I go running back, and there my dad is, laying in his hospital bed in our house, and he is crying like a baby. Crying harder than I have ever seen him cry. I've never really seen him cry up to this point. I said, "Dad, what's wrong with you?" And he said, "Son, I've been saved." You see, he resented God so much. How could you take my legs away? Make me feel so helpless. Wasn't I a good man? That whole spiel. Well, just like myself, my dad's idea of God was all wrong. But thankfully, God gave him one last chance to reconsider. And boy, he took it. He said, "Son, something happened to me in that coma." He said, "I was talking to somebody. I was talking to a man. And I can't remember what the man looked like, but I know that man was Jesus Christ." That's what he said to me. And the same feeling I had in that hospital room when he came back into consciousness was the same feeling, but stronger, that I had in that room. You see, people get scared to death, and they'll really start looking at God and Jesus and all these things. But my dad had known he was going to die for so long, he wasn't afraid to die. What was happening in that room was real. However, I had not suffered enough for it to properly break through and change what was going to happen in my life, which was already happening. But my dad was an ornery man, always telling dirty jokes, always, cutting up. And for the next, for the rest of his life, ever since that moment, if he's ever talking bad about somebody in his presence, he'd say, "Nah, nope, don't you. If they're not around, don't talk about them," He truly began rolling with God. I would usually say walking, but he was in a wheelchair. And that's who he was. Now, July of 2013, God sends me an angel. My wife today. And within 2 months, she gets pregnant. You know, we were just dating. And we didn't tell anybody. She's pregnant with my son. And on December 25th, 2013, she was 3 or 4 months pregnant by this point. And there was really no getting around divulging the information because she was starting to show. So we decided to write in this long page Christmas card. I got to write to my dad and my mom everything that I felt they needed to hear as to how great they were and what they've done for me in my life. And at the end of this Christmas card, there was an ultrasound picture. Now, I didn't want to be around my dad when he read it because it's, you know, a little corny. And he was back in the room, and I just remember when he saw that ultrasound picture, he said, "No way! Is this really happening? I'm going to be a grandpa." You know, and me and my wife just like, oh, it was probably the greatest Christmas present that I could have ever given him, maybe ever received. So, July 2nd of 2014, my son, Wyatt, was born. His grandson. So, got to hold that grandbaby. And I have pictures of him in that room when my son was born, holding him. And August of 2013, I got married to my wife. And my father bought her dress. So he got to see his son get married. And now, we'll fast forward. Life was good, you know. Fast forward to 2014, December the 17th. My dad got super sick again, just like he was before the coma. And it's like fluid was in his lungs, you know. I mean, it was really bad. He was shivering, always had a blanket on. And one evening, the pastor from my old church in Salem calls my house, and I answer it, and he says, "Hey, Jared, we hear your daddy's been trying to get to church, but his health is permitting him from coming, so we wanted to know if we could bring church to him." I said, "Well, my dad is really sick right now. Let me see if he's up to it." And I went and told him what they wanted to do, and my dad said, "Oh, son, don't you see? This is a gift from God. This has to happen." So I told him to come on the very next day, December 18th. The pastor and, I don't know, maybe 20-some people from church that have known my dad his whole life, known him since he was a kid, you know. They all show up, and I put my dad beside the couch in his wheelchair, and I sat there with my hand on his shoulder the whole service. Full service, singing, preaching, fellowshipping, all of it. And at the end of this service, the pastor says, "Has anybody got any prayer requests?" And my dad perks up there and says, "Yeah, I'd like for y'all to pray for me that I might get out of this chair one day and walk again." And when he said that, I was just thinking, like, "Dad, why would you say that? You know, like, it's clearly never going to happen, you know." Well, the very next day, you know, service was over. Now it's December the 19th, 2014. I get woke up very abruptly by my mother. She says, "Jared, you got to get up. You got to get your dad in a wheelchair. Every breath he's taking sounds like he's drowning. Ambulance is on the way." So I go running in there, get him in his chair. And when I sat him up, it cleared some of it out to where he could talk and he could understand what was being said to him. But this was most certainly the end for my father, and I could tell. So I wheel him to the exact same spot that he sat through that church service with, beside the couch. It took the ambulance about 20 minutes to get out to the house, and in that 20 minutes, I got to sit down and look up at my father and tell him everything that I could ever have needed to tell him. That he would never understand what he was able to do for me from that chair. that it was my greatest honor to care for him and be his son. Everything that I could muster in my heart to tell him, I got to tell him. My wife, her father committed suicide when she was young, and he was her dad, My father was her father, and she got to tell him that she was so honored to have a father figure like him in her life. My stepdaughter, who had become my dad's best friend, I sent her downstairs because I didn't want her to see what was about to happen. But before she went down, she said, "Bye, Papa, I love you." My son said his first words in this moment. He said, "Bye-bye." And then there was my mother, his angel, thick and thin, till death do us part, the epitome of that statement. She got to lean down and tell him that he was the greatest partner that she could ever ask for, and she wouldn't change a thing. And got to tell him that everything she needed to tell him, and he understood all this. And then I look outside, and the EMTs are walking up on the porch, and as soon as they got to the door, I look over, and I see my dad just go, and he was dead. 5 seconds. I mean, it was almost instant. So, the very next day, he got up out of that chair and he walked again. A lifetime of suffering. But he got right with God. God gave him that grandbaby. God let him see his son get married. And he got to die at home. And he was always so scared that his death was going to be miserable, filled with nothing but suffering. But God took him like that. And I was standing there, a raging drug addict. He didn't know it. He didn't know it, thank God. I hid it for many years. I thought it was going to be sad when he went, but what I saw that day was the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen in my life, was my father's death. I love to share that story. I feel that it is owed to the world because I got to witness that. And I feel that people need to hear it, because you can't hear that story and have any doubt that there is something very profound going on behind the scenes of this existence. So anyway, back to me. So, like I said, around age 14, I had really started to get this resentment in my heart. Maybe it was for God, my brother, life itself, I don't know, but my innocence was stripped of me, and I was just getting filled with rage, angry, But you'd never know it, because I have my dad's sense of humor. I'd make you laugh, but something was going on inside of me that I can't explain. By age 15, no, I was 16. See, I was the kind of kid, I remember in middle school talking to my best friend, 6th grade, I said, "Man, I will never touch drugs. I will never do drugs. I'll never smoke pot. I'll never drink. I'll never smoke cigarettes." I was a good kid. But by age 16, I started smoking the devil's lettuce. Yeah. A buddy of mine, he came in and he came over to my house, said, "Man, let's go for a drive." And he said, "Man, you got to smoke this stuff, bud. It's awesome." And I resisted a little bit, but I decided, you know what? Why not? Well, let's see what all the hype is about. And I tried pot for the first time, and And I thoroughly enjoyed it, you know. And reflecting back as the man I am today, I can tell you that the true problem with what happened there, it wasn't the fact that I smoked that pot. It was the fact that I had given away one of my principles that I had stood on. And when I gave that one away and found that by giving it away, I got something in return that made me feel good, what other principles might I be able to give away? And, you know. So I thought maybe I should try drinking. And, see, I was kind of a fat kid growing up and pretty shy and backward. My brother certainly didn't help my self-esteem very much. But when I started drinking, suddenly this shy little boy, I was the man. Or at least I thought I was. And no longer shy, that's for sure. And I started to have a little better luck with the ladies. So what could ever be wrong with this? This is awesome, and I'm going to keep on doing it, you know. And I started just smoking pot and drinking, and it never, in the beginning, you know, no, you could never foresee what lies ahead. It's just all fun and games, and it's not hurting me financially. It's a weekend thing, all this, you know, and you feel cool and getting all these friends and stuff. Well, when my older brother, who, by the way, what I want to tell you guys is, despite how much he tormented me my whole life, he was my hero. Period. Like, and by age 16, and I always wanted his approval. I wanted him to accept me and want to hang out with me and stuff, but it was never the case. I was always the annoying little brother. But by age 16, when he found out I was drinking and smoking, suddenly that made me cool to him. So he gets me and one of my buddies and starts taking us to these parties where it's him and his friends who were like 20, 21 years old, you know. And it just made me feel awesome. I felt so cool. And, you know, you never felt safer in this world unless you were with my brother. Like, it's, I knew I had nothing to worry about if I was with him. And the first party he ever took me to, he's like, well, listen up, everybody. This is my little brother. If anybody messes with him, I will kill you. And they knew better than to test that. So, but I wasn't just this weird kid that was there, you know. I was the life of the party in no time. And one particular party, I'd been drinking and smoking pot for about a year at this point. And I'm there and, like, I'm having a good time, but I cannot find my brother, and things are getting a little awkward. You know, I kind of want to stick by him, so I go throughout the house looking for him. And I come across this bedroom, and I go in there, and sure enough, there he is. He's got this plate in his lap with white powder on it, these lines. And I said, what are you doing in here, man? He said, Jared, we're doing cocaine in here, and you don't want no part of this. I said, cocaine? What's it do? He said, it turns all your bad feelings into good feelings. It's a nightmare. I said, I think I'd like to try me some of that cocaine. This was, of course, a reference from Dewey Cox. I hope that some of you watching this have seen it, so I don't look completely stupid. But that is pretty much how it went down. That's what he was doing, and sure enough, I tried a hard drug for my first time, and just rolled with it. And like I said, I was able to manage. This was just a party thing for quite some time, but then by age 17, something happened. What I would come to later find out was the absolute downfall of my life. I'm an old farm boy, hauling wood, raising cows and stuff my whole life. And me and my brother, when I was 17, we was up on the hill cutting a load of firewood. And I busted up some blocks and I threw the hammer down, and I just started complaining. I said, man, I'm so tired of this stuff. My back's always hurting. I'm only 17 and my back's killing me. Like, what is it? He said, man, quit your complaining. He used some other words, but he said, come over here. I got something for you. And he pulled out this little green pill, said OC80 on it. Now, y'all know how to do that stuff. I don't really like to mention the drugs I use, but I just feel that this story needs to be told exactly how it is. So the first encounter with an opiate that I had was at age 17, and it was half of an Oxy 80. Now, what this had done, all of a sudden this hard work is not hard work anymore. It's actually pretty enjoyable. But it goes away, and then the very next day, I'm back doing this hard work again. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, this sucks. But I know what would make it not suck. So, over the next, we'll say 5 years, I started to really get into the opiates. And I'm going to tell you right now that if I, the man that sits here today, could travel back in time and tell my younger self, "Bud, you don't understand what lies ahead. You must stop now, or you are going to know suffering unlike anything you have ever known or could possibly imagine." That sounds like such a good thought, but I can assure you that it wouldn't have mattered. I would have told myself to get lost. There's no way that this could be bad. It makes me feel so good. Well, by my early 20s, there was no more than pills around, and I started doing heroin. And slowly but surely, my life began to unravel, but I was very good at hiding this from my family and those that loved me. You'd have never known, but I was absolutely broken inside. Now, let's get into the solution here. I could go on for days talking about my madness, but here's what you need to know. By age 27, okay, we'll go to early September of 2017. And let me just set the scene for you that was my life. I had no money, no job. My friends had all turned to snakes. My marriage was in shambles. I had lost all 3 of my children for the second time to the state of West Virginia. They're not as forgiven that second time, but it didn't matter how forgiven they was because I had given up on life. Every day was filled with the thoughts of, please God, let this next shot kill me. And if it doesn't soon, I'm just going to kill myself. So me and my wife both decided that our children were better off without us. So we're going to die anyway. So we completely stopped returning the texts and calls of CPS. Didn't even show up to the last court date. And our rights were terminated for abandonment. So my kids are gone. I lived in this dirty old trailer that had no power, no water. Now, early September, it was pretty hot outside. It was definitely hot in that trailer. But we had nowhere else. My mother, who was the last person besides my family that lives kind of far away, there's the last person that I had close to me that truly loved me. And I was not even allowed over at her house anymore because I was always stealing stuff. And my poor grandmother, no way I was going to bother her with any of my stuff. But anyway, so I had nothing left. I had given everything away. Everything. So what happened? Early September, one morning, I woke up dope sick, and so was my wife. We were in the madness together, but we were toxic for each other. But anyway, I woke up one morning, and the only way that I could possibly get my drugs for that day is because my mom was done. I had this thought to call my poor grandmother and beg her for $70. And I was just so done with selling my dignity and my honor for this substance. And I'll tell you right now, when a man has suffered enough, whether he believes in God or he doesn't, he will look up. if he still yet draws breath. And that is what happened in this moment. I've said 1,000,000 prayers in my life, but I've never truly meant them. Foxhole prayers out of fear. But in this moment, I truly felt the presence of God. And I looked up and I said, God, I don't know what you are, but please save me from this hell that I have made for myself. And it's funny how he works. I ended up calling old Granny that day, and she gave me the money. And I ended up getting well for that day, and I had a little bit for the next day, so I didn't have to go sick. Now, as bad as that is, it was all part of the plan. Because I'm going to tell you, and another thing I want to say is, God hears what is in your heart, not what comes out of your mouth. And if my words don't match what's in my heart, then my words are meaningless. So it's funny how God works, because the very next day, after getting well, if I didn't get well, I wouldn't have been able to do this. But I got well, and I'm up there at the Barbersville Walmart, and I am scouring the lot for cash receipts. I was going to go in, steal what was on them, straight to the return desk, and get dope money. And while I'm doing this, I wind up at the bottom of the lot. And I look over, and there's this runaway shopping cart stopped at the curb. And I notice there's something sitting where you'd put a kid, and it's a lady's wallet. So I walk over there and I crack it open. I'm thinking there's no way there's anything in this, but there's $300 cash, 6 credit cards, and a debit card. And I said, oh my God. Sweetheart, get in the car. We ain't going to do this receipt stuff no more. And I went straight to the tobacco store down there on Route 60. And I bought 4 cartons of Newports just to see if I could hand one of these cards and sign, and off I go. And sure enough, it's sign right here, sir. It was like $300 and some for that. And all I had to do was sign. So now it's off to the Huntington Walmart, where I bought $1,000 worth of Walmart gift cards. And I swiped that card, signed, and they're mine. So now it's off to the pawn shop, pawn of 50%. So now I have $800, and I go and get plenty of supplies, and I go back to my house, and me and the old lady each do a shot that takes us out for like 14 hours. And I woke up the next day, and the first thought on my mind was, oh no, how have we slept this long? We probably overdosed, who knows? But my first thoughts was, that lady has probably canceled those cards. So we get well for the day, shoot back up to Walmart, and I'm trying to buy a 20-ounce Mountain Dew. And every card that I swiped was declined. She had canceled them. And that was 7 swipes that day. So there was a swipe at the tobacco store, a swipe at Walmart the first day, 7 more swipes the next day, even though they were declined. That is 9 felony counts of fraudulent use of an access device. That is 9 1 to 10 years. 9 to 90. But I didn't care. I knew I was going to get in trouble. There's no way to get away with that. But I was on a mission to die. I'm the real alcoholic. No matter what consequence life throws at me, I do not stop. I go on to the bitter end. Well, anyway, after about 3 days after all this, I get a phone call from my neighbor that says, Jared, for the love of God, do not come home. There are 3 state troopers in your driveway. So I avoided going home, and I kind of ran from them for several days, but ran out of my drugs and was getting sick, so I had to come back into town, rip some people off, got what I needed. And I got quite the buzz going on that day, and I pull into this gas pump, Exxon by HIMG on Route 60. I'm waiting on this guy to call me, and I end up nodding out behind the wheel at that gas pump. Clerk called the law. I come to, there's an EMS Jeep beside me. I said, oh man, I know what's behind them. So I start the car up, roll about 3 feet, and then sure enough, there's the Barbersville police behind me. And they pull me right back around behind Fazoli's, and they get me out, and they're doing this field sobriety test. And just as the test was starting, in pulls this state boy, old Trooper Brody, whips in there, and the first words out of this guy's mouth is, never mind with that test, fellas, he's high. He's always high. I don't even know who this man is. I don't know. I don't don't think you do. He said, yeah, I'm the guy that took your son out of your arms about 7 months ago, but you don't remember that, do you? And I didn't. I was so out of my mind on drugs that I do not even recall the day that the police took my son out of my arms. But anyway, he looks at me and he says, but that ain't why I'm here. And he said, you know why I'm here today, Mr. Parsons? And he pulls out this file and opens her up and says, is this you? And I'm going to tell you, I found something out about Walmart's security cameras that day. I think they used the same ones in the Pentagon, actually, because there's just this crystal clear image of me holding this card at that checkout line. He says, is this you? And he said, actually, don't answer that. Put your hands behind your back. Cuffs me, puts me on the curb, pulls his laptop out, sets it on record, and he says, Mr. Parsons, I want you to think very carefully what you say here. He said, is this you using such and such's card at the Walmart, blah, 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 blah. I'm a liar. I'm an alcoholic. I will not look at myself. I will not accept consequences to my actions. I lie to myself. Or I could remain silent. Those are my thoughts. I ain't saying nothing. But the same feeling that I had on the foot of the bed when I cried out to God to save me came back. It doesn't tell you in words what you shouldn't do, but you know, without the words, you feel it. And it was telling me not to lie. The chickens had come home to roost. It was time to finally get honest for the first time in my life. And I looked that man right in the eyes and I said, yes, sir, that is me. And he took me to the Western Regional Jail with my wife. I wasn't in there too long. I was in there 7 days. And my wonderful mother, first day, said there's no way she's getting me out. Finally showed me some tough love. Said, you are right where you're supposed to be and I ain't got to worry about you. You're going to stay in there. So off I go to detox in jail, which is the worst experience I've ever had in my life. Just watching the sun go across the wall day in and day out, feeling like you wanted to die. But I called old mama back, and I can tell you right now, I am alive solely because of my mother's love. Well, that's a huge part of it. I called her back like 4 days later after I felt somewhat all right, and she said, I'm glad you called. I've been emailing a man at Recovery Point. When the bed's open, I'll come bond you out. And that's exactly what happened. On September the 27th, 2017, I walked through the doors of treatment as the broken man that I described in the beginning of all this. And here I sit. That was the last day I ever used drugs. Got high in the bathroom that very same day. But here I sit, a little over 3 years and 8 months sober. You see, I got my children back. Even though my rights were terminated, it was all in the plan. If I'd have just made the right choice, finally. CPS case is closed. My marriage has never been better. Still the same woman. We had to learn to recover on our own 2 feet, separated from one another. She had to find God on her own. And I had to do the same, and God knew that, and He set it up perfectly. She went to Charleston, I went to Huntington. The relationship with my mother has never been better. I am finally the son that she has always deserved. She can have peace of mind. I am the father that my kids have always deserved, that I denied them their whole lives. I have a home, a little dog, money in the bank, an amazing job that fills me with meaning and purpose. I have everything back that I ever gave away that was worthwhile in this life. And that's all great, and I thank God for it every day. But I gained something else that I never knew existed in this life. And that is a life walking with Jesus Christ and God. And with that comes a peace that I never could possibly have imagined existed. A life without worry. And one of my favorite scriptures out of Matthew is when Jesus says, Why do you worry about your life? Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. Everything will be given to you. So how do I sit here? How do I get to be this man when I was just the absolute hopeless, lost junkie, stealing and doing all of the worst things that a man can do in his life? How does that man get to be who I am today? Well, there is only one answer to that question. And that is God. Period. And I didn't want to accept that my whole life, and look where that got me. I didn't want to believe He was real. So you know what I did? I suffered. I suffered more than words could ever describe. So, we're getting to the end here. And this is what I want to end with. I am not special. I am not unique. I, just like all of you, was a child of God. And this happened for me. And since I am no different or better than anyone else that might be watching this, I assure you that it can happen for you. Yeah. There's no doubt. It's a promise. Worst thing about the dope. Worst thing about alcohol. Drinking. Once you step over the line and become alcoholic or an addict, you are robbed of your God-given choices in life. No more free will. You're left with one choice. And that choice is go sick, look at yourself, look at the man in the mirror, or get well. Numb all that out. And I'm not going sick. And I will do whatever it takes to make sure that doesn't happen. But God, before we get off of here, Albert Einstein, you see, he said that when you witness events in your life where the odds of them occurring are astronomical, you're seeing the hand of God. So I ask all of you, what are the odds that the day after I say that prayer on the foot of the bed, the day after, I'm up there at that Walmart at that time of day? At that time of day, a little bit before, there just so happened to be this lady shopping there. What are the odds that this lady, who was clearly very responsible, I mean, look what she had in her wallet. What are the odds that this woman would drive off without her wallet? Leave it in a shopping cart. What are the odds that this buggy that she left her wallet in would just roll to the end of the lot? It's a runaway buggy, you could tell. And what are the odds that of all the men to find that wallet, it was me? And me finding that wallet set in motion a chain of events that ripped me from the madness and placed me in a position to where I suffered and detoxed and got led to a place where I had a choice again. I was no longer sick. God led me back to a choice. He did for me what I could not do for myself. Amen. So what is the choice that you will all make? I thank God every day that I was able, and I don't even know how. God, it was so hard in the beginning. Early recovery, every single day, at night especially, I thought about leaving. I can't be here no more. Don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens, everybody. Strength, reliance upon God, and you will all be okay. So like I said earlier, it happened for me, and I promise it can happen for you. Thanks for letting me do this. It's my honor. I'd like to close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who would trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and glory forever. Amen.